Hello, welcome to another episode of Sensedia Talks. I'm your host, Lisa Arthur. Thank you for joining. We're recording this seminar for both live attendees and on-demand viewers. You can connect with me and our thought leaders by getting our LinkedIn code at the end of this seminar. And today we're going to talk about multi-everything, the only realistic architecture in today's agentic era. In our discussion today, we're aiming to talk about why AI tools are inevitably fragmented and why betting on one vendor is a real risk. We aim to unpack the multi-everything strategy, an independent layer that coordinates AI, APIs, agents, and integrations. And there, you'll find a thread that's going to run through our entire conversation today, governance, because governance must come before scale. Agentic AI will fail in production before it ever scales if it isn't governed from day one. Our environments are already fragmented. People have multiple clouds, gateways, models, MCP servers. The challenge isn't stopping that sprawl, it's governing it. And that means sovereignty over data, tools, business operations with real audit trails behind every decision. So let's go ahead and get started and meet our thought leaders on all things AI and APIs. And I want to challenge our two guest speakers to be authentic. I know them both, so I don't fear for that. We're not here to talk sales, and they know that. They are here to talk about ideas and ways to help you in this agentic era. So I look forward to a conversation, and let me have them both introduce themselves here. First, I'm going to introduce and welcome Emmanuel Paraskakis. He is the CEO at Level 250 and a much sought-after voice on product management, developer experience, and all things APIs and business software models. Emmanuel, thank you so much for taking your time to be here. Please tell our audience a little bit about yourself and Level 250.
Yeah, Lisa, thanks for having me. So glad to be here. So a little bit about myself. I've been in API product management for about 15 or 16 years now. And I started out building large API surfaces, large API products for fintech companies, somewhat regulated companies in the fintech environment. And then I switched over to building tools for people that build APIs, API design tools, API documentation and testing tools. So I worked at Apiary. I worked on the Swagger projects. At some point, we sold Apiary to Oracle, and I worked on their first cloud-native API gateway there. And throughout this, I've been trying to help people build better APIs. Today, I have my own company, Level 250. I do consulting, I do training. And today the mandate has expanded. So today we're building all of these agentic tools, tools for agents, products for agents, things like not only APIs, but MCP and CLIs and skills and so on. And I'm here to help you build the best product possible for your consumers that are going to be agents, I think, from now on.
Excellent. Thank you for that intro. And I know our audience is going to learn a lot from you, Emmanuel. Thanks again. Next, I'd like to introduce somebody I work closely with, Felipe Turquetto. I'll call him Turquetto, so you'll notice that through the webinar. He is our North American head of solutions at Sensedia. He's also one of our leaders internally helping us make the shift to AI in our own adoption. Please welcome Felipe Turquetto. Turquetto, please tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Sure thing. Thank you, Lisa, and very glad to talk with Emmanuel. So I'm one of the users of the technology that Emmanuel shipped, so Swagger user, as many of you guys during this webinar for sure. So I am Felipe Turquet. I'm the head of solutions for Sensedia North America. So just a little bit about Sensedia, guys. Sensedia is an enterprise AI enabler nowadays. So we are helping enterprise around the globe to securely connect AI tools and APIs with multiple models and everything, which is the theme of this webinar, which is multi-everything. Okay. Myself, I have more than 10 years of experience into the integration area. Like I said, I'm using a lot of tools that Emmanuel shipped. My previous work was with large banks and big financial institutions in the past. And similar to Emmanuel as well, I migrate to build integration tools, now working with Sensedia that have an API management as well. So I'm with Sensedia for 7 years now. And now we are in the big transformation as everybody. I'm working alongside with our engineering area with our brand new product, which is the AI Gateway. That's why we are in the middle of this discussion of multi-everything. So the design of the product was a very huge challenge for us to understand the needs of the market, to understand AI. And in the middle of all that, we are doing our own AI transformation. So those things are very interesting nowadays. So this is a little bit about me.
Excellent. Thank you. And I can't think of two guys to have this conversation, and I look forward to it. And let's jump in. So for years, companies have rushed into the AI to chase efficiency. And I say for years because AI has been around longer than the last craze of 24 months that we've all been talking about it. But here's the paradox. Efficiency alone doesn't pay the bills. When every competitor has access to the same base models, those models become commoditized and efficiency stops being a competitive edge. So the real hurdle isn't technology anymore, it's the architecture. We recently published a report with one of our partners, Squadra Digital, an MIT Sloan management review out of Brazil called Efficiency Doesn't Pay the Bills. And one of the facts we found is that 66% of executives call AI a defined priority, but only 7% of the tech professionals say it's actually integrated across multiple systems. That gap is today's whole conversation. We're going to explore how a multi-everything architecture breaks that bottleneck so you can scale securely without being held hostage by one vendor's roadmap. And we're going to break this into 4 different pillars, if you will, Emmanuel and Torquedo. And the first one we're going to talk about is the reality of API and AI fragmentation. And here's where it starts. At the survey taken at our global Apex event in 2026, the survey found 54% of tech professionals don't have structured access to the corporate data their AI applications need. Torquedo and I talk a lot to executives. We're hearing this time and time again. A third are stitching context together manually, and almost a quarter can't access the data at all. To scale, enterprises absolutely have to bridge 2 different worlds. The deterministic world of APIs with rate limits and SLAs, and now the non-deterministic world of AI with token budgets and hallucination risk. As our CEO Kleber puts it, agents have to act as super connectors across both. So Emmanuel, I'd love you to start off our Q&A here. And my question to you is, how can enterprises evolve their API landscapes so agents can securely discover, access, and act on governed data and business capabilities?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the data access problem has always been there. We've always needed to have data access into our corporate data, expose it out to customers, but also consume it within the organization. And that problem doesn't go away with agents. We did digital transformation, we did monetization. The 3 things that are an issue at issue there are, first of all, security. Does the right person have access to the right data? Is the data current? Is the output of the data going to be good enough? The model will take the data, it might hallucinate results, and so on. So that problem stays there. I think what needs to happen is your existing access control and role-based access control has to show up in that layer as well. So keep the role-based access control there, build it into an MCP layer if that's what you're using, and make sure you're able to have guardrails to keep the model from hallucinating.
Excellent.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Torquato, thoughts on that?
I completely agree, and also would put now the challenge as well is APIs. We built API programs. I'm pretty sure Emmanuel built a lot of API programs as well. So those APIs are meant to human consumption, as you might know. And basically, we have a challenge now to understand, okay, those APIs are very good assets, are very good access data points, but they're not really ready for agents, right? So we need to understand as well, what is the strategy for the data access, specifically for the AI application to an AI agent, right? Not just simply, we do have an MCP on top of an API, and voila, that's it. Everything sorted. Rate limits are different. The ways that the agent and the application interact with those access points are completely different. So normally the answer is almost always rely on the infrastructure and your architecture. So if you're failing in the basics, like in the API program itself, and right now some folks are saying that, okay, we are no longer doing the API program. In my humble opinion, the API program is more important than ever. So essentially, you need to get this sorted because you have another API consumer that is very powerful, which are the agents, essentially. So for me, the secret sauce is going to be the architecture in your API program that needs to be very robust to handle those new consumptions over the agent and AI application.
Yeah, for most organizations, I think the API layer continues to exist. A lot of organizations have put a lot of investments into the API layer. That's not going to go away. You can build all of your new agentic and MCP tools on top of that layer. However, I think as Torquato observes, it's not going to be one-on-one with your existing APIs. You're going to have to modify or redesign or tailor, if you will, your existing APIs for agents. They're not going to work out of the box every time. But the infrastructure and the APIs that you have are going to be the basis for all of this.
That makes a lot of sense, guys. And, Torquato, let's take it a little bit deeper. How should enterprise architects coordinate governance for deterministic APIs and probabilistic AI without losing the specialized controls, the policies, and operational requirements? How do we get there?
Yeah, and this is a thing that we see a lot in the enterprises when so folks understand that generative AI can pretty much generate anything. Yet can, but normally it's going to hallucinate. So essentially is to understand the workflow. And this is the secret sauce as well, because some parts of the software that are deterministic in nature are not going to go anywhere. They're going to keep going as is today. Generative AI is a very good tool, but needs to be used when it makes sense. This is the first part, right? So really understand that there is a probabilistic perspective over the generative AI, and the deterministic way that software was built is not going to go anywhere. It's going to keep going, right? So this is the main differentiation. This is the number one part. And to provide this intersection, AI tooling with the right APIs, with the right functionalities that you have, and then go through the generative AI to actually generate what do make sense with the data that you already have within your API. For me, this is, I don't know if I'm stating the obvious, but we see this confusion a lot. Okay? And this is the first part that you need to coordinate. And there is a lot, and Emmanuel is going to I don't know if Emmanuel is going to agree with me, but many companies in the API world back in the days was, okay, let's just start and figure out governance after. So they do start an API program without a governance program, an API govern. In the API world, I think it's a huge mistake to say, yeah, let's start using AI without governance. It's kind of, we'll figure out later. No, it's very tricky and it's very dangerous for you to start an entire AI program without figure out what is the level of governance that you need, especially into heavy regulatory industry, right? So this is the first thing. And those, back in my days when, okay, we do have 100 of APIs, so let's start to do governance, is no longer valid for the non-deterministic world. It's not going to be valid when your agents are out in production. So you need to start governance. So it's slow to move fast. So it's not really to start AI without governance. This is my point of view.
Yeah, I think there's three things there. So first of all, there's this urgency and angst to get going with AI, to show that we're ahead, show that we're changing our old APIs into MCP or whatever, and show that we're very heavy on API usage. And that's, sometimes leads to the wrong outcomes. Organizations have to be careful, especially regulated organizations, and you have to make sure you're not ending up in the news or something. That's going to be a worse outcome if you have a security incident or a leak of data. So that's the one thing. The other thing is you absolutely have to think about a product based perspective. Who are these agents? What are the people behind these agents? It's always going to be a person that's going to be launching an agent, even if the agent is autonomous. What is the desired outcome there? And a lot of the time, these are going to be coding agents. These are going to be autonomous agents that need access to tools. There's a lot of tools. There's a lot of MCP servers out there. One directory that I'm following, for example, is adding about 6,000 MCP servers every week, and about 100,000 MCP tools behind those MCP servers. So how can you really keep track of that? Which MCP servers should you allow your agents to have access to? That's the governance part. In my opinion, you need to think about the product aspect of what is this agent supposed to do? What is its persona? Is it a coding agent, a QA agent, a research agent? And then you have to find the tools and curate, if you will, the tools and MCP servers that agent is going to use. Because there's going to be varied quality of MCP servers out there. Not all of them are going to be good. They're going to lead to security issues. They're going to lead to cost control issues with tokens. So you have to make sure persona, job to be done, and tool available to the agent. And no more than that. Specific tools available to an agent. You probably have to build an internal tools and MCP marketplace in your organization for that.
I love it. Real practical advice in a real time that's needed. Thank you, guys. Let's now go to our second topic, keeping on the architectural front, around preserving architectural agility. The real risk of single vendor AI isn't just the cost exposure. It's the enterprises that quietly outsource their architectural decisions. Every new use case deepens the dependency until a shortcut becomes the default operating model. So this matters because the landscape is still moving. Models, standards, regulations, and agents shifting from generating context to executing real business operations. So the goal isn't vendor neutrality for its own sake. It's agility and control over where models run, how agents access systems, and how data flows without a governance overhaul every time something changes. So that sounds like a lot to get to that, Emmanuel. How important is model and agent independence? Is this really something AI leaders need to think about?
Yeah, I think it's critical, and there's a number of reasons. The chief reason, first of all, being that models change all the time. One model that's really good today is not good tomorrow. One model that's you're using today is going to be more expensive tomorrow. And also, you might not be allowed to use it anymore. So the sovereignty does become a problem. You absolutely have to be in a place where you can independently switch vendors, models, architect, various protocols that you're using. And the way to do this is, I think, to separate what your governance layer and rules are from the actual models. If your governance rules live in a independent place, then you're able to switch models, vendor models at will. You're able to use the open weight models. You're able to use whatever is the next big thing that comes along. And of course, you're able to deal with the fact that, sometimes model access might be taken away from you, as we've seen recently.
And not just models, right? So the way that those models and those things work alongside with your infrastructure is also important. Sovereignty and the way that you have access to your own data, I think it's crucial. So do not, uh, get confused over a kickstart that you can choose a single vendor or something that you is going to generate a temporary thing to a full architecture perspective. So that's why starting with the governance is going to also bring you to this table, deep thinking over, okay, this is a valid kickstart or not. So this is also an important thing to check.
Excellent. And Torquato, let's keep the conversation going. What does lock-in actually mean in this agentic era? How would you help our audience get their arms around that?
There are so many ways. One of the Emmanuel already mentioned, which is model lock-in, and we understand that as you can have multiple vendors that is going to offer you the next big thing. There are sovereignty perspectives and concerns, but also, like I mentioned before, data sovereignty, where the data is flowing to and from. Also, some folks try to lock you in a silent mode over what you are charging their systems to hold your data, and basically is holding you hostage. So we need to be very careful in terms of lock-in because it sounds obvious, but there are many lock-ins that are not that obvious and it's going to simultaneously steal your infrastructure and your architecture. It's always by this decision if it's a one-way door or a two-way door. So if you're going to get your data flowing throughout a specific system, this data is important enough for you to get a copy. It's crucial for your company to send this data away from your control. The models that are using, where they're running, what the type of data that you're exchanged with. So there are many, many things that we need to be very careful in terms of lock-in. So right now we're understanding that, okay, you can be multi-cloud, multi-vendor, multi-gateway, multi-model. There are many ways for you to pay attention. So my main message here is be very careful on what lock-in means, especially within your data.
Get really specific. And Emmanuel, you mentioned something a minute ago about this need for an independent governance layer separate from the models. I want to drill into that with both of you a little bit here. How can an independent governance layer give consistent policy observability and auditability without becoming a bottleneck itself? Help us understand that. And I'll ask both of you guys to weigh in there.
Okay. So I think I think it's a matter of bias. Always, if you have a layer around observability, cost control, and so on, and it's tied to a specific vendor, there's always going to be the risk of bias to that vendor. And I think we are in an era where inference is given out cheaply. I think there's a lot of subsidization that happens. I don't think that's going to happen forever. So you are going to see changes in cost of the model, cost of the APIs behind the models, and so on. What they are charging you to use the models. I think the other thing that we haven't talked about is what you are doing on your side to kind of control these costs. And that's going to be, how do you use the tools? How do you design the tools? Even for your existing APIs, if they're going to be used by agents, you have to make sure it doesn't take 2 or 3 tries for every outcome, for every API call to be successful. And that will happen because models, as you said, they're non-deterministic. They will throw things at your API or your integration surface, and they will try to handle the results that they have back as best as possible. Same thing happens with MCP. A lot of people look at an MCP server and say, okay, well, there's names of tools and descriptions of tools. That's nice. It's so we can know what the tools are capable of doing. But in fact, the naming and the description of tools is UX. And the better the UX, the more efficient it's going to be to keep those costs in control. It's going to take you fewer turns to get to an outcome, fewer discoveries, to get to the specific outcome that you want. So a lot of it is in our hands. So govern on the one side what your architecture looks like, what the rules are, what models you're using, and for what. But at the same time, design your own internal systems so that you optimize for that cost. API design is important again, and so now is MCP design as well.
I love it. Start small to go fast. All right. Torquedo, any other thoughts on that before we move on to our third topic around MCP sprawl?
The architecture mind always is the composition and responsibilities, right? So orchestration and governance layer needs to be decoupled for the implementation effect and needs to really control what you have to create this abstraction. So always work with this abstraction, saying that your underlying models can change. The cost can change, so it needs to be ready. So if every model change is going to cost you engineering perspective to go ahead and change everything that you're doing, basically you're not decoupled enough. So this is the game, and it's always going to be this game: the composition and the responsibility.
Makes sense. Thanks for those insights. Guys, let's now talk about MCP sprawl and this unified catalog. The Model Context Protocol, or MCP, is becoming the standard of how agents access tools and data. Our survey found that 68% of tech environments haven't adopted MCP in production yet. So we're on the edge of what we're calling MCP sprawl, kind of like what we saw with APIs. Our co-founder, Marcilio Oliveira, warns that agents can be spun up by anyone at any moment and consume that data faster than ever. So if every business unit deploys its own agents and MCP servers without that coordination that we've been talking about, there's chaos. So Emmanuel and Torquedo, as we're here, obviously a lot of MCP out there, and we're seeing adoption surging more. What are the risks of letting these decentralized MCP servers multiply across the business?
Basically, we were hearing about API sprawl not long ago. So now we do have MCP sprawl. So first and foremost, this is a security risk, right? So surface of attack. MCP server is an exposure, right? So first, if you don't have your MCPs very well governed and listed, at least, your attack surface is way bigger than you're thinking, and you don't even know where is this surface. So this is the first thing, right? And here's the thing with MCPs. Now almost everybody have an MCP. SaaS vendors, everybody do have MCP, right? And they are growing and burning so fast that we cannot, keep track of it. And this is the first concern that I have. it's okay to have an MCP, but it's not okay to not have this in an enterprise governance guardrail. And when we say governance, normally it says, yeah, we're going to slow down the process. Not really. The security perspective of enterprise, you just need one thing to go wrong to have a very big reputational impact, right? So first and foremost, do the basic in the right way, right? So do not follow, oh, I need to go fast and do this without any governance guardrails, especially with MPP. MCP are an exposure, right? Decentralizing them and not knowing what is the attack surface is the recipe for disaster, basically. So centralize them, do the basics, keep your API and MCP strategies very tight together because they normally walk together. So this is the basic essentially.
I mean, have a strategy to begin with, right? Have an API and MCP strategy to begin with. I'm not going to talk more about I talked about the costs of MCP and how, your MCP sprawl can basically cost you and your consumers and customers. I think there is a deeper also problem besides the cost. There's a problem of trust. Can I trust MCP servers, especially from third parties? The way the protocol works, you can and should do your due diligence and say, okay, well, this MCP server that comes from my vendor, my SaaS vendor, I checked it, it looks good, everything looks fine. Tool descriptions, tools can change under you. So this has to be an ongoing due diligence. Just to give you an example, things that can be pushed up through MCP, either the data coming in through MCP or even tool descriptions, are things like prompt injections and a risk called tool poisoning. Basically, maliciously or by mistake, you might be giving the model more than it asked for. It's almost like the old SQL injection problem. You're putting there information that shouldn't be there. The model is interpreting it as prompts. And of course, newer models are better at stopping these injection attempts. But sometimes in your agent, you're going to use older, kind of cheaper models. Not everybody's going to use the latest frontier model. So that is a problem, and that means that you have to have an ongoing type of governance and due diligence. And of course, you have to balance things with deterministic tools on the other end. One very important thing to keep in mind is you should be building either as an MCP provider or as a consumer of MCP, you should be building evals. Evals is a fancy name for testing. You should be using your eval harnesses such that you can say which prompts I think are going to be used, which prompts are valid, which prompts are guiding outcomes that my agents want. Run these, observe the tool invocations, and make sure that the right prompts are calling the right tools. Observe those failures, observe the success rate. Are you driving up the success rate or is it going down? What do you need to do in your due diligence to go fix that?
Really love how we've covered this topic. And I think that you've segued us well, Emmanuel, into our final pillar, which brings us all around this governance topic. The survey found that 71% of tech professionals and 81% of the tech executives admit they have basic or zero control over what their AI produces. Its accuracy, its performance, its costs. One of the reasons a lot of these projects are going to fail, right? So we've seen this play out with a major paper packaging exporter who centralized governance through an AI gateway to manage all that access, to monitor usage and apply the right guardrails, right? To scale that capability across multiple specialized agents. So, Emmanuel, help our audience understand how a unified governance plane lets them swap LLM providers overnight without rewriting these security or routing policies.
Yeah, I think it's very important to have that independence, and the big reason behind it is that you are writing the policies and the rules independent of any vendor and any model. That's not theoretical. That's actually um, existential, if you will. It You basically have to um, reduce the cost and risk of swapping models, of swapping protocols. You have to have that ongoing governance. Build it over time. You're not going to build it from day one. Especially regulated organizations have to move fairly cautiously into this. So build your governance over time in a controlled manner. And a lot of the regulated industries have confidential data, banking data, for example, private customer data. You can't let agents and non-deterministic actors, loose on these. You have to absolutely build your governance over time.
It's an imperative for sure. And I love that you highlighted highly regulated institutions. We work globally with a lot of those firms, and we found one financial institution cut model development time by 95% and generated an estimated 48.7 million in annual value by centralizing their AI platform. So, Torquedo, how does decoupling the control from the runtime drive that kind of speed while keeping them safe?
One, the basic thing Emmanuel already touched, which is get your controls independent, right? So first and foremost, the developers and everybody using those models don't need to be extra careful over the controls and everything. And the institution have full control on what is being consumed over time and by who, right? So first and foremost, you have your strategy, you have your gates, meaning your AI gateway is there. Everybody's consuming from the gateway. Every single rule that needs to be there, especially for regulated industries, are there by force, right? So nobody is consuming a model in the wild, right? So with that said, the famous non-functional requirements, right? Avoiding prompt injections, avoid a lot of things that the AI gateway is going to treat is already solved, right? And now the focus can be in the outcome, in the business outcome. So it's, again, the separation of the responsibilities of those things. What those executives want, business outcome, right? Tangible things for the business, not technology by technology, right? So this is exactly the separation. And this is, for me, the secret sauce over it. So you separate those no functional requirements that are extremely crucial for the business to keep everything safe from the business development itself. So you're a developer, everybody can focus on what really matters. That's why I think this is the secret for those numbers, right? So that it's safe to consume from that. You know that you have your guardrails and everything. The company safeguarded, and now we can focus on what really matters, which is generate the outcomes for the business. And this is going to I think this is going to bring more success to the AI project itself, because we are kind of way more focused on the job to be done in the business side, not really on the, guardrails and everything that you need to do to make it happen, right?
Makes sense. Any other thoughts before we start to close this up and go to our lightning round?
I think I love the prominence of business outcomes that Torquedo talked about. We're kind of taking it back to the product management aspect that's so familiar to me. Why are we doing this? Are we doing this just to impress, the board and say that we have AI, say that we're doing agents, that we have MCP, or are we really driving business outcomes? And those business outcomes should not be far from, what guides our AI initiatives. So I really love that you brought that up.
Well, I think you guys have had a lot of gems for our audience. And now this is where we want to get into the final key takeaways. So, gentlemen, I'm going to ask each of you, this is our lightning round where we like just one key takeaway for our audience from each of you. Um, and I know it's hard to find just one. Um, and Emmanuel, I'm going to start with you. So, what's the one piece of advice you would give our audience to think about today?
What I'd want people to encourage to do is to actually go and get firsthand experience with all this. Everyone who's making decisions, who's creating all of these surfaces, should know what we're talking about. They should experience the hallucinations or the wrong tool calls or the problem of token consumption firsthand. So go play with these things. Have the prototypes. It doesn't necessarily mean that all the prototypes are going to ship into production, but there's nothing like getting firsthand experience. You're building a muscle by learning. Yes, you're being cautious. Yes, you're not letting all your experiments loose on your production data and your customer data. But firsthand beats, let's call it secondhand or third hand. And the other thing to think about is as you watch the failures, as you watch the problems and deal with the problems, know that models are going to get infinitely better. So plan for a world where these models are getting better and more capable.
I'm going to get the hook. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Lisa. I'm going to get the hook for Emmanuel, which is after you try and fail so many times, be very mindful about those failures and have this strategy based on them. So this is one thing. Get everything that you learned first, and then when you're going to fly, start with your governance and be extremely mindful on what you learn, essentially.
I love it. Great advice. And that brings us to the end. I think we could have talked about this a lot longer, actually, but we want to be cognizant of our audience's time. And thank you to everyone for watching. I want to give big gratitude to you, Emmanuel. You are a very busy CEO, and we thank you for taking time to be here and to help educate our audience. Torquato, I know you're busy. Thank you. Appreciate it. And great to see you here versus in a meeting. It's been fun. And for all of you, here are the QR codes I promised you. Here is the link to Emmanuel and his work at Level 250. Please reach out to him. He works with a lot of great companies and is able to help you as well. And here is the link to Sensedia, to Torquato and I, and also the research paper we just released that we've talked and mentioned about today that we did with Squadra and MIT Sloan Business Review in Brazil. That now brings us to the end of Sensedia Talks. Until our next session, I wish you all good pilots and great outcomes with your AI project. Take care.